The morning air was cold and sharp as Marcus Webb made his way through the dense Virginia forest. He had been back from deployment for 3 months now, trying to adjust to civilian life after 8 years serving as a U.S. Marine. The transition wasn't easy. Some days, the silence of his small apartment felt heavier than any burden he had carried overseas. That's why he started taking these long walks through the woods near his home. The towering trees and quiet paths gave him something his cramped apartment never could: peace. Marcus walked the same trail every morning, a 5-mile loop that took him deep into the forest before circling back toward town. He knew every turn, every fallen log, every clearing, but this particular Wednesday morning felt different. The birds seemed quieter than usual, and there was a strange tension in the air that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Years of military training had taught him to trust his instincts, so he slowed his pace and became more alert to his surroundings. About 2 miles into his walk, Marcus heard something that made him stop completely. It was faint at first, almost like the wind rustling through leaves, but then he heard it again, a soft whimpering sound coming from somewhere off the main trail. He stood perfectly still, listening carefully. The sound came again, weak but unmistakable. It was an animal in distress. Marcus left the trail and pushed through the underbrush following the sound. Branches scratched at his jacket and face as he made his way through the thick vegetation. The whimpering grew louder as he went deeper into the woods. His heart rate picked up, not from fear, but from the urgency of the situation. Whatever was out there needed help, and it needed it soon. After pushing through a particularly thick cluster of bushes, Marcus emerged into a small clearing he had never seen before. And there, huddled against the base of a massive oak tree, was a German shepherd. The dog looked up at him with eyes full of fear and exhaustion. Marcus could immediately tell something was wrong. The dog's breathing was labored, and she didn't try to run away or show any aggression. She just watched him with those tired, pleading eyes. Marcus approached slowly, speaking in a soft, calm voice. He had grown up with dogs and knew how to move around frightened animals. As he got closer, he noticed the dog's swollen belly and suddenly understood. This wasn't just any lost dog. This was a pregnant German shepherd, and from the looks of it, she was very close to giving birth. His mind raced with questions. How did she end up out here alone? Where was her owner? How long had she been wandering these woods? He knelt down a few feet away from her, extending his hand slowly so she could catch his scent. The dog sniffed weakly at the air but didn't move. Marcus could see she was wearing a collar, though it was dirty and partially hidden by her thick fur. He inched closer, talking to her the whole time, telling her she was going to be okay, that he was there to help. The German shepherd watched him carefully but seemed to sense he meant no harm. When Marcus finally got close enough to touch her, he gently placed his hand on her head. The dog's tail gave a tiny, barely noticeable wag. It was a good sign. He carefully examined her, checking for injuries. Her paws were cut and dirty, and she was far too thin for a dog in her condition. She was also shivering despite her thick coat. Marcus realized she must have been out here for days, maybe even longer. He managed to read the tag on her collar. The name engraved on it read Luna, followed by a phone number. Marcus immediately pulled out his phone, hoping to reach the owner, but his heart sank when he saw the screen. No signal. He was too deep in the forest. He would have to get Luna out of here first, but moving a pregnant dog in labor through dense forest wouldn't be easy. Marcus took off his jacket and carefully wrapped it around Luna, trying to provide some warmth. She seemed grateful for it, pressing closer to him. He could feel her body trembling beneath his hands. As he sat there beside her, trying to figure out the best way to carry her back to civilization, Luna suddenly tensed. Her body went rigid and she let out a low, pained whine. Marcus's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. Luna wasn't just close to giving birth. She was in active labor right here in the middle of the forest. His military training kicked in immediately. Marcus had seen stressful situations before, though none quite like this. He knew panicking wouldn't help anyone. He needed to stay calm and think clearly. First priority was keeping Luna safe and comfortable. Second priority was getting help. But looking at the dog's condition, he wasn't sure they had time to do both. Luna's breathing became more rapid and shallow. She shifted positions, clearly uncomfortable and in pain. Marcus stroked her head gently, speaking in soothing tones. He told her she was brave, that she was doing great, that everything would be okay. He wasn't sure if he believed his own words, but he knew the tone of his voice mattered more than what he was actually saying. As he sat there in that clearing, with a suffering dog depending on him for survival, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt needed. He felt purpose. All the emptiness and uncertainty of the past 3 months seemed to fade away. Right now, in this moment, he knew exactly what he had to do. He had to save Luna and her puppies no matter what it took. Marcus looked around the clearing, assessing his options. The nearest road was at least 2 miles away through rough terrain. Carrying a full-grown German Shepherd that distance would be challenging even if she wasn't pregnant and in labor. He could leave her here and run for help, but he had no idea how quickly things would progress. If something went wrong while he was gone, Luna and her puppies could die. He made his decision. He would stay with Luna and help her through the delivery right here in the forest. Then once the puppies were born and stable, he would figure out how to get them all to safety. It wasn't the ideal plan, but it was the only one that made sense given the circumstances. Marcus positioned himself beside Luna, ready to help however he could. The German Shepherd looked at him with those expressive eyes, and he could swear he saw trust there. She had been abandoned and alone in these woods, scared and pregnant, and now here was this stranger promising to help her. Marcus silently vowed he wouldn't let her down. He had spent his military career protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Today, he would do the same for this dog and her unborn puppies. The forest around them seemed to grow quieter, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next in this small clearing where a former Marine and a desperate German Shepherd had found each other against all odds. Luna's contractions were getting stronger and more frequent. Marcus watched helplessly as the German Shepherd struggled, her body working hard to bring new life into the world under the worst possible circumstances. He had never delivered puppies before, but he refused to let his inexperience paralyze him with fear. He had been in difficult situations before, situations where lives depended on him making the right decisions with limited information. This was no different. Marcus remembered something his grandmother used to say when he was a kid. She would tell him that animals knew what to do when it was time to give birth, that nature had a way of handling these things. He hoped she was right. His role here wasn't to take over, but to support Luna through the process and intervene only if something went seriously wrong. He checked his surroundings again, looking for anything that might be useful. He had his water bottle, his phone with no signal, and his jacket which was now wrapped around Luna. Not much to work with, but he would make it work. He always did. That's what being a Marine had taught him, how to adapt and overcome with whatever resources were available. Luna shifted again, moving from her side onto her stomach, then back to her side. She was restless, trying to find a comfortable position. Marcus gently stroked her back, maintaining that physical connection that seemed to calm her. He could feel the muscles in her body tensing and releasing with each contraction. The dog was exhausted, and they hadn't even reached the hardest part yet. Time seemed to move differently in that forest clearing. Minutes felt like hours. Marcus kept talking to Luna, his voice steady and reassuring. He told her about his own dog from childhood, a mixed breed named Buddy who had been his best friend through elementary school. He told her about the dogs he had met during his deployments, the working dogs who served alongside soldiers with incredible bravery and loyalty. He wasn't sure if the talking was helping Luna, but it was definitely helping him stay focused and calm. Then suddenly, everything changed. Luna's body went completely rigid and she let out a sound Marcus had never heard before, a deep, guttural noise that was part whimper, part growl. Her breathing became rapid pants. Marcus moved closer, positioning himself where he could see what was happening. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized the first puppy was coming. He watched in amazement as Luna's body worked exactly as it was designed to. Within minutes, a tiny sac emerged. Luna immediately turned her head and began licking at it, breaking the membrane and clearing the puppy's face. Marcus held his breath, waiting for signs of life. For a few terrifying seconds, nothing happened. Then the tiny puppy took its first breath and let out a small, squeaky sound. Marcus felt a surge of relief so powerful it almost brought tears to his eyes. The puppy was tiny, wet, and looked impossibly fragile. Luna continued to lick it vigorously, stimulating its breathing and circulation. The maternal instincts were strong. Even though she was clearly exhausted and frightened, Marcus watched in awe, barely breathing himself. He had witnessed a miracle, pure and simple. life emerging in the middle of a cold forest against all odds. But Luna wasn't done. Her body tensed again, and Marcus realized another puppy was on the way. The process repeated itself. The contractions, the pushing, the emergence of another tiny life in its protective sac. Luna again tore open the membrane and began cleaning the second puppy. This one seemed more vigorous than the first, squirming and making noise almost immediately. Marcus counted in his head, 2 puppies so far, both alive and breathing. The births continued over the next hour. Each time a puppy arrived, Marcus felt the same mixture of anxiety and wonder. Would this one be okay? Would it breathe? Would it be strong enough to survive? Luna worked tirelessly between deliveries, cleaning each puppy and nudging them toward her belly where they instinctively began trying to nurse. Marcus helped when he could, gently moving the earlier puppies to keep them safe while Luna focused on the newest arrival. By the time the 6th puppy was born, Luna was completely spent. She lay on her side, panting heavily, her eyes half closed. But around her, 6 tiny puppies squirmed and squeaked, very much alive. Marcus did a quick count and examination. All 6 appeared healthy, moving around and making noise. The smallest one was about half the size of the others, which worried him slightly, but it seemed just as active and determined as its siblings. Marcus knew they weren't out of danger yet. The puppies needed to stay warm and Luna needed water and food. He carefully opened his water bottle and cupped his hand, offering water to Luna. She lapped at it eagerly, drinking as much as he could give her. He made a mental note that his water supply was now limited, but Luna's need was greater than his. The sun was higher in the sky now, and Marcus realized he had been in the forest for over 3 hours. People would start wondering where he was soon. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, usually saw him return from his morning walks around 9. When he didn't show up, she might get concerned. But he couldn't leave Luna and the puppies yet. They were too vulnerable. He pulled out his phone again and climbed to his feet, walking around the clearing holding the phone up high, hoping to catch even a single bar of signal. Nothing. He would have to make a decision soon. Stay here and hope someone came looking for him, or try to carry Luna and 6 newborn puppies 2 miles through dense forest to reach help. Neither option was ideal, but sitting here doing nothing wasn't acceptable either. Marcus had never been the type to wait for rescue. He was usually the one doing the rescuing. He looked down at Luna, who was now lying quietly with all 6 puppies nursing. Despite everything she had been through, the German Shepherd looked peaceful in this moment. She had done something incredible and she seemed to know it. Marcus knelt down beside the small family. He needed to examine Luna more carefully now that the births were over. He gently felt her stomach, checking for any signs that there might be another puppy still inside. Everything felt normal as far as he could tell. He checked the puppies too, counting them again just to be sure. 6 healthy puppies, each one no bigger than his hand. As he sat there contemplating his next move, Marcus heard something that made his heart leap with hope. It was faint but unmistakable, a voice calling out in the distance. Someone was in the forest and they were calling a name. It took Marcus a moment to realize they were calling for Luna. The owner was out here searching for their lost dog. Marcus immediately stood up and cupped his hands around his mouth. He shouted as loud as he could, calling back toward the voice. He yelled that he had found Luna, that she was here, that she had just given birth. He shouted his location as best he could, describing the clearing and the massive oak tree. Then he waited, listening. The voice called back much closer now. Marcus could tell it was a woman and she sounded frantic. He called out again, guiding her toward the clearing. Within minutes, he could hear someone crashing through the underbrush. Then a woman burst into the clearing, her face red and streaked with tears, her clothes covered in dirt and leaves. She stopped dead when she saw Luna and the puppies. Her hands flew to her mouth and she made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She looked at Marcus, then back at Luna, then at the puppies as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Marcus stepped aside, giving her room to reach her dog. The woman dropped to her knees beside Luna, and the German Shepherd's tail began wagging weakly. The woman was crying openly now, running her hands over Luna's head, checking the puppies, looking back at Marcus with an expression of pure gratitude and disbelief. Marcus felt a strange tightness in his chest as he watched the reunion. This was why he had stayed. This was why he had helped. For this exact moment right here. The woman's name was Sarah Mitchell, And as she knelt beside Luna and her puppies, the whole story came pouring out between sobs. She had been driving through a neighboring town 4 days ago, with Luna in the back of her SUV. They were heading to a veterinary appointment, because Sarah knew Luna was close to her due date and wanted to make sure everything was progressing normally. But at a rest stop, something had spooked Luna, and the dog had bolted from the vehicle before Sarah could secure her leash properly. Sarah had been searching ever since. She had called animal control, posted on every social media group she could find, put up flyers throughout 3 different towns, and walked these woods from sunrise to sunset every single day. Last night she had barely slept, terrified that Luna was out here scared and alone, possibly giving birth without any help. Her worst fears had come true, except for one crucial detail. Marcus had been there. Marcus listened to Sarah's story while keeping an eye on the puppies. They were still nursing actively, which he knew was a good sign. Luna needed to rest and recover, but first they had to get this little family out of the forest and to proper medical care. Sarah was so overwhelmed with emotion that Marcus had to gently redirect her focus toward the practical matters at hand. Sarah explained that her car was parked at the trailhead about 1.5 miles away. She had been searching in a grid pattern, calling Luna's name, when she heard Marcus shouting. She had a carrier in her vehicle that might work for transporting the puppies, and she had blankets and water. The question was how to move everyone safely. Marcus quickly formulated a plan. He would carry Luna while Sarah handled the puppies. They would need to move the puppies into something that would keep them warm and secure during the trek back. Sarah had a large canvas shopping bag with her, which they lined with Marcus's jacket. One by one, they carefully placed the 6 puppies into the makeshift carrier. The tiny creatures squirmed and squeaked, but settled down once they were all together, keeping each other warm. Getting Luna to her feet was the next challenge. The German Shepherd was exhausted from labor and weak from days without proper food. Marcus spoke to her softly, encouraging her to stand. Luna tried, her legs shaking, but she couldn't maintain her balance. Marcus made a decision. He was going to have to carry her the entire way. He had carried heavier loads during his Marine training, but never anything alive and vulnerable. Marcus carefully positioned himself and lifted Luna into his arms. She was heavier than he expected, probably around 70 pounds even in her weakened state. Luna tensed at first, but then seemed to understand he was trying to help. She relaxed against his chest, her head resting on his shoulder. Sarah picked up the bag of puppies, cradling it carefully against her body. Marcus could see the determination in her eyes. She had found her dog alive, and she wasn't going to let anything happen to these puppies. Together, they began the slow journey back toward the trailhead. The trek was harder than Marcus anticipated. Luna's weight in his arms was one thing, but navigating the uneven forest floor while carrying a living creature who occasionally shifted her position was entirely different. His arms began to ache within the first 10 minutes, but he pushed through it. He had endured far worse physical challenges during his military career. This pain meant something good. It meant he was saving lives. Sarah walked ahead of him, constantly checking on the puppies and looking back to make sure Marcus was okay. She offered several times to take turns carrying Luna, but Marcus knew the dog was too heavy for Sarah to manage, especially while also watching where she was stepping. He told her to focus on the puppies and leading them back to the car. He would handle Luna. They had to stop 3 times during the journey. Each time, Marcus carefully lowered Luna to the ground so both he and the dog could rest. During these breaks, Sarah would open the bag slightly so they could check on the puppies. All 6 were still moving and making noise, which was reassuring. Marcus drank the last of his water, and Sarah shared some from her own bottle. Luna drank eagerly each time they stopped. During the second rest break, Sarah told Marcus more about Luna. She had rescued the German Shepherd 2 years ago from a shelter. Luna had been found abandoned in a different state, pregnant then too, though she had lost those puppies. Sarah had nursed her back to health, and they had bonded deeply. When Luna became pregnant again several months ago, Sarah had been extra careful, determined to give her dog the happy ending she deserved. The escape at the rest stop had been Sarah's worst nightmare coming true. Marcus understood that kind of bond. He had seen it between soldiers and their working dogs overseas. There was something special about the connection between a human and a dog, especially when they had been through hardship together. He could see that Sarah loved Luna with the kind of fierce devotion that wouldn't quit. no matter how hard the search became or how slim the chances seemed. When they finally emerged from the forest onto the main trail, both Marcus and Sarah felt a surge of relief. The trailhead parking area was visible in the distance. Sarah's silver SUV was the only vehicle there, sitting exactly where she had left it hours ago when she began today's search. They were almost to safety. Sarah rushed ahead to open the back of her vehicle and pull out the large dog carrier she had mentioned. It was designed for a dog Luna's size, with soft padding inside and good ventilation. She also grabbed several thick blankets and spread them in the carrier. Marcus carried Luna the last 100 yards and carefully set her down inside the carrier. Luna immediately curled up, clearly grateful to be somewhere soft and safe. The puppies were next. Sarah gently transferred each one from the canvas bag into the carrier with their mother. Luna's tail wagged weakly as each puppy was placed near her. Within seconds, the puppies were crawling toward their mother, seeking warmth and milk. It was beautiful to watch this small family reunited and safe. Sarah turned to Marcus and he saw fresh tears streaming down her face. But these were different tears than before. These were tears of joy and overwhelming gratitude. She tried to thank him, but the words seemed inadequate for what he had done. How do you thank someone for saving not just one life, but 7? How do you thank a stranger who stayed with your frightened dog through hours of labor in a cold forest, who sacrificed his own comfort and safety to help? Marcus felt uncomfortable with her gratitude. He hadn't done anything special in his mind. He had just done what needed to be done. Any decent person would have helped a suffering animal, but Sarah insisted that what he did was extraordinary. She said most people would have left Luna there and just called animal control. Marcus had stayed, had helped deliver the puppies, had ensured all of them survived. Sarah insisted on getting Marcus's contact information. She wanted to stay in touch, to update him on how Luna and the puppies were doing, and to properly thank him once the shock and exhaustion of the past few days wore off. Marcus gave her his phone number, though he told her it really wasn't necessary. They needed to get Luna and the puppies to a veterinarian immediately. Sarah knew an emergency vet clinic about 20 minutes away. She asked Marcus if he wanted to come along, but he could see she had everything under control now. His job was done. Luna and her puppies were safe, and that's what mattered. He told Sarah to focus on getting her dog family to the vet, and that she could call him later to let him know how everything turned out. Sarah hugged Marcus tightly before getting into her car. She thanked him again, her voice breaking with emotion. Marcus stepped back and watched as she carefully drove out of the parking area, heading toward the vet clinic. He stood there long after her car disappeared from view, feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt like he had made a real difference. He felt like the skills and instincts he had developed during his military service had translated into something meaningful in civilian life. Marcus began the walk back to his apartment, his arms still aching from carrying Luna, his clothes dirty and torn from pushing through the forest. He was exhausted, hungry, and his morning had turned into something he never could have predicted when he set out for a simple walk hours ago. But he was also satisfied in a way he hadn't been since returning from deployment. He had found purpose again, even if just for one morning. Marcus had just stepped out of the shower when his phone rang. He was still toweling his hair dry, his body aching pleasantly from the morning's unexpected adventure. When he saw it was an unknown local number, he almost didn't answer, thinking it might be a spam call. But something made him pick up. It was Sarah, calling from the veterinary clinic. Her voice was bright with relief as she shared the news. The vet had examined Luna and all 6 puppies thoroughly. Despite the ordeal, Luna was in remarkably good shape. She was dehydrated and underweight, but there were no infections or complications from giving birth in the woods. The vet said it was almost miraculous that everything had gone so smoothly without any medical intervention. Sarah's voice caught as she told Marcus that the vet had said if Luna had been alone much longer, the outcome could have been very different. The puppies were all healthy too. Even the smallest one, which Marcus had been worried about, was nursing well and appeared to be thriving. The vet wanted to keep Luna and the puppies overnight for observation, just to be safe, but expected them to go home the next day. Sarah told Marcus that she had explained everything to the vet, how he had stayed with Luna through the entire birth, how he had kept her calm and safe. The vet had been impressed and said Marcus's presence had likely made the difference between a successful delivery and a tragedy. Marcus didn't know what to say. He was glad everything had worked out, but the praise made him uncomfortable. He changed the subject, asking Sarah what her plans were for the puppies once they were old enough to leave their mother. Sarah explained that she had already been in contact with several families who were interested in adopting German Shepherd puppies. Luna came from good bloodlines, and Sarah had planned the pregnancy carefully with a responsible breeding program. Each puppy would go to a carefully vetted home. Before ending the call, Sarah made Marcus promise to visit Luna and the puppies once they were home and settled. She wanted him to see them healthy and thriving, to know that his efforts had lasting impact. Marcus agreed, though he wasn't sure why it felt so important to him. He had done his good deed. The story should be over, but something about this situation felt unfinished. The next few days fell into a strange new rhythm. Marcus continued his morning walks, though he noticed he now automatically scanned the forest for any signs of animals in distress. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had noticed his disheveled return on that Wednesday and demanded to know what happened. When he told her the story, she clasped her hands together and insisted he was a hero. Marcus disagreed but didn't argue with her. Mrs. Chen was 73 and set in her opinions. On Friday afternoon, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Luna and the puppies were home and doing wonderfully. Sarah included a photo of all 6 puppies piled together in a cozy whelping box, their tiny faces peaceful in sleep. The smallest one was right in the middle of the pile, apparently claiming its spot among its siblings. Marcus found himself smiling at the image, something he hadn't done much lately. Sarah texted again on Saturday, asking if Marcus would like to visit that afternoon. He had no real plans, and his apartment felt particularly empty that day. He agreed, and Sarah sent him her address. She lived about 15 minutes away, in a modest house with a large fenced backyard. Perfect for dogs, Marcus thought as he pulled up to the curb. Sarah greeted him at the door with a warm smile. She looked completely different from the frantic, tearful woman he had met in the forest. Her hair was brushed, her clothes were clean, and while she still looked tired, there was a lightness about her that hadn't been there before. She led Marcus through the house to a spare bedroom she had converted into a space for Luna and the puppies. The room was warm and quiet, with soft lighting and comfortable blankets everywhere. Luna was lying on her side in a large whelping box, and the 6 puppies were either nursing or sleeping against her. When Marcus entered the room, Luna's head lifted and her tail began to wag. Sarah looked surprised. She told Marcus that Luna had been skittish around everyone except her since the ordeal in the forest. The vet technicians had noted how nervous she was during the examination. But here she was, clearly recognizing Marcus and showing no fear at all. Sarah said she thought Luna remembered him, that she knew he was the one who had helped her when she was most vulnerable. Marcus knelt beside the whelping box and extended his hand. Luna sniffed it, then licked his fingers. Her tail wagged harder. Marcus carefully stroked her head, speaking softly to her just as he had in the forest. The German Shepherd's eyes were bright and alert now, so different from the exhausted, frightened animal he had found days ago. This was Luna, healthy and safe, surrounded by her puppies in a warm home with someone who loved her. Sarah invited Marcus to sit on the floor beside the box, and together they watched the puppies. She had named them all. There was Atlas, the biggest and most adventurous, Nova and Stella, 2 females who seemed inseparable, Ranger, who had been the second born, Scout, who was constantly moving even in sleep, and finally, the smallest one, who Sarah had named Marcus. Marcus looked at her in surprise. Sarah explained that she couldn't name the puppy anything else. This little one had been born in the forest just like its siblings, but it was smaller and more vulnerable. Yet it was thriving because Marcus had been there, had helped Luna through the birth, had made sure all 6 puppies arrived safely. Naming the smallest puppy after him felt right. Marcus felt emotion welling up in his chest as he looked at the tiny puppy named after him. The little German Shepherd was nursing contentedly, its small paws kneading against Luna's belly. Something about seeing new life, about being part of bringing these puppies safely into the world, touched something deep inside Marcus that he had thought was broken. Sarah must have noticed the emotion on his face because she gently asked him about his background. Marcus found himself telling her about his time in the Marines, about the difficulty of adjusting to civilian life, about feeling lost and purposeless. He told her things he hadn't told anyone, not even his family. Maybe it was easier because Sarah was essentially a stranger, Or maybe it was because she had seen him at his best, doing something that mattered, and he wanted her to understand that it had meant as much to him as it had to Luna. Sarah listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished talking, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised him. She told him she had been lost too a few years ago. She had gone through a difficult divorce, had struggled with depression, and had felt like life had no meaning. Rescuing Luna had changed everything. Taking care of something that depended on her, having a purpose each day, slowly rebuilt what had been broken inside her. She suggested that maybe Marcus needed something similar. Not necessarily a dog, but something that gave him a reason to get up each morning with purpose, something that connected him to the world and to other living things. She said the way he had helped Luna showed he had a gift for staying calm in crisis situations and for knowing what to do when others would panic. Those were valuable skills that shouldn't go to waste. Marcus hadn't thought about it that way before. He had just done what needed to be done in the moment. But Sarah pointed out that not everyone could do what he did. Most people would have panicked finding a dog in labor in the woods. They might have run for help and left Luna alone, or tried to move her too soon, or made any number of mistakes that could have endangered her or the puppies. Marcus had made all the right choices because of who he was and what his experiences had taught him. They talked for over an hour while the puppies nursed and slept. Sarah told Marcus about each puppy's emerging personality. Atlas was fearless and would likely need firm training. Nova and Stella were gentle and would probably be good therapy dogs. Ranger was independent and smart. Scout was curious about everything. And little Marcus was determined, always fighting to get the best nursing spot despite being the smallest. Before Marcus left that afternoon, Sarah made an unexpected proposal. She asked if he would be interested in volunteering at the local animal shelter. They were always desperate for help, especially people who could handle nervous or traumatized animals. She volunteered there herself sometimes, which was how she had first connected with Luna. She thought Marcus would be perfect for it, given how well he had handled Luna during such a stressful situation. Marcus didn't commit to anything, but he took the shelter's information. As he drove home that evening, he thought about Sarah's suggestion. The idea of working with animals, of helping creatures who had been abandoned or mistreated, appealed to something in him. It was different from his military service, but similar in the ways that mattered. It was about protection, about helping those who couldn't help themselves, about making a tangible difference. That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. He researched volunteer opportunities at the animal shelter Sarah had mentioned. The more he read, the more interested he became. They needed people who could work with shy dogs, who could help socialize animals, who could stay calm around frightened or aggressive pets. It was exactly the kind of challenge that might give his life the structure and purpose it had been missing. He filled out the volunteer application online, not sure if anything would come of it, but feeling like he needed to try. As he hit submit, Marcus glanced at the photo Sarah had texted him, the one showing all 6 puppies sleeping together. Somewhere in that pile was a tiny puppy named after him, a living reminder that sometimes being in the right place at the 3 weeks had passed since Marcus found Luna in the forest, and his life had changed in ways he never expected. The animal shelter had responded to his volunteer application within 2 days, eager to have someone with his background and temperament. After a brief orientation and training session, Marcus started volunteering 3 afternoons a week. The work was challenging and sometimes heartbreaking, but it was exactly what he needed. The shelter housed anywhere from 30 to 50 animals at a time, mostly dogs with a few cats mixed in. Many had been abandoned, some had been seized from neglect situations, and others were simply lost pets whose owners never came looking. Marcus's role was to help socialize the more fearful dogs, working with them to build trust so they would be more adoptable. It turned out that his calm demeanor and patience, traits that had served him well in the military, were perfect for this kind of work. His favorite dog at the shelter was a pit bull mix named Sergeant. The name made Marcus smile the first time he heard it. Sergeant had been found chained in a backyard, severely underweight and terrified of people. The shelter staff said he would probably need months of rehabilitation before he could be adopted. But Marcus saw something in Sergeant's eyes that reminded him of soldiers he had known who were dealing with trauma. Fear, yes, but also a desperate hope that someone would prove the world could be kind. Marcus spent hours sitting quietly in Sergeant's kennel, not trying to touch the dog or force interaction, just being present. He would talk softly about nothing in particular, letting Sargent get used to his voice. After a week, Sargent started inching closer. After 2 weeks, the dog ate treats from Marcus's hand. By the 3rd week, Sargent would rest his head on Marcus's leg, finally trusting that this human wouldn't hurt him. The other volunteers noticed the change in Marcus too. He smiled more. He engaged in conversations. The heaviness that had surrounded him when he first started volunteering seemed to be lifting. One of the staff members, an older woman named Patricia, told him that helping broken things heal had a way of healing the helper too. Marcus thought she might be right. He still visited Luna and the puppies regularly. Sarah had become a good friend, one of the first real friends Marcus had made since leaving the military. The puppies were growing fast, their eyes open now, their personalities becoming more distinct every day. They were starting to waddle around the whelping box, exploring their small world with increasing confidence. Little Marcus, the smallest puppy, had captured everyone's heart. Despite his size, he was fearless and determined. He was always the first to investigate new sounds or try to climb out of the box. Sarah joked that the puppy had inherited the courage of his namesake. The real Marcus felt a strange sense of pride watching the little German shepherd grow stronger each day. Sarah had been documenting the puppy's growth on social media, and the story of Luna's rescue had spread further than either of them expected. Local news had picked up the story, wanting to interview Marcus about finding Luna and helping deliver the puppies. Marcus had declined, uncomfortable with the attention, but Sarah had done the interview and made sure everyone knew about his role in the rescue. The publicity had an unexpected consequence. The animal shelter where Marcus volunteered saw a significant increase in donations and volunteer applications. People were inspired by the story, by the idea that one person's choice to help could save 7 lives. The shelter director told Marcus that his actions had created ripples that extended far beyond that forest clearing. One afternoon, as Marcus sat in Sargent's kennel with the pit bull's head resting trustingly on his knee, his phone rang. It was Sarah, and she sounded excited. One of the families interested in adopting a puppy was coming that evening to meet them, and she wanted Marcus to be there. The family had specifically requested to meet him after reading about the rescue. They wanted to thank him and to hear the story firsthand. Marcus agreed, though the attention still made him uncomfortable. That evening, he drove to Sarah's house and was surprised to find not just one family but several cars parked outside. Sarah greeted him at the door with an apologetic smile. She explained that word had gotten out he would be there, and all the prospective adopters wanted to meet him. It had turned into an impromptu gathering. Inside, the house was full of people. There were 3 families who had been approved to adopt puppies, plus a few of Sarah's friends who had helped search for Luna during those desperate days. Everyone wanted to hear about finding Luna, about the birth, about how he had kept them all safe. Marcus found himself telling the story again, leaving out the parts about his own struggles and focusing on Luna's strength and maternal instinct. The puppies were the stars of the evening, of course. They were 6 weeks old now, plump and playful, tumbling over each other and exploring every corner of the room. Each prospective family spent time with the puppy they hoped to adopt, watching how the puppy interacted with their children, seeing if the personalities matched. Marcus noticed that little Marcus, his namesake, drew the most attention. Despite still being the smallest, the puppy had a magnetism about him. He was the first to greet strangers, the first to investigate new toys, the first to try climbing the small barrier Sarah had set up to keep the puppies contained. A young couple with a 7-year-old daughter seemed particularly drawn to him. The little girl, whose name was Emma, sat on the floor and the puppy immediately climbed into her lap. Emma giggled as the puppy licked her face and her parents exchanged meaningful looks. The father, a man named David, approached Marcus. He explained that they had been looking for the right dog for over a year. Emma had been asking for a puppy since her 5th birthday, but they wanted to wait until they found one that was the perfect fit for their family. David said that when he read about Luna's rescue and saw the photos of the puppies, something told him to reach out to Sarah. Then when he learned one of the puppies was named Marcus after the Marine who had saved them all, he felt even more strongly that this was meant to be. David himself was a veteran, Army infantry, and he understood the struggle of transitioning back to civilian life. He told Marcus that what he had done for Luna showed character and compassion. and those were the qualities he wanted to teach his daughter. Watching Emma play with the small puppy, Marcus felt something shift inside him. This was the future that had been uncertain 3 weeks ago in that forest clearing. This little girl would grow up with this dog, would learn responsibility and empathy by caring for him, would have a loyal companion through all the ups and downs of childhood. And it was all possible because Marcus had chosen to follow the sound of whimpering into the woods instead of continuing his walk. Sarah officially matched the puppies with their new families that evening. Little Marcus would go home with David, his wife Jennifer, and Emma in 2 more weeks, once the puppies were fully weaned and had their first round of vaccinations. Atlas went to a family with teenage boys who wanted an active dog for hiking and outdoor adventures. Nova and Stella, the inseparable pair, were adopted together by an older couple whose children had moved away. Ranger was chosen by a single man who worked from home and wanted a loyal companion. And Scout went to a family with a large farm where the puppy would have endless space to explore. After the families left, Marcus stayed to help Sarah clean up. They sat on the floor of the puppy room, watching Luna nurse her babies for what would be one of the last times. Soon the puppies would be eating solid food exclusively, ready to start their new lives with their forever families. Luna seemed content, her tail wagging slowly as her puppies nursed and slept against her. Sarah told Marcus she had been thinking about getting another dog to keep Luna company once the puppies were gone. The house would feel empty with just one dog after weeks of chaos and noise. She asked if Marcus had ever considered getting a dog of his own. The question caught him off guard. He had been so focused on helping other people's dogs that he hadn't thought about having one of his own, but the idea appealed to him. Coming home to an empty apartment had been one of the hardest parts of civilian life. Having a dog would give structure to his days, a reason to maintain a routine, something that depended on him and gave him purpose. Sarah suggested he talk to Patricia at the shelter. There were always dogs who needed homes, and with his experience and patience, he could help one of the harder-to-place animals. Marcus thought about Sargent. The pit bull had come so far in just 3 weeks, but he still had a long way to go before he would be ready for adoption by a typical family. He needed someone patient, someone who understood trauma and recovery, someone willing to put in the time and effort required, someone exactly like Marcus. Little Marcus had grown into a handsome young dog, though still smaller than his siblings. Emma had brought photos showing the puppy's first day at school with her, his first swim in the lake, his first snowfall. David told Marcus that the dog had brought their family closer together and had helped David himself find peace with his military service. He was now volunteering with an organization that provided service dogs to disabled veterans. The reporter interviewed Marcus about finding Luna and helping with the birth. Marcus kept his answers short and focused on Luna's bravery rather than his own actions. But the reporter was skilled and drew out the fuller story, about Marcus's struggle with civilian life, about how helping Luna had given him purpose, about the volunteer work that followed, about adopting Sargent. By the end of the interview, Marcus had shared more than he intended. When the segment aired 2 weeks later, Marcus watched it with Mrs. Chen, who insisted on bringing popcorn and making it an event. He cringed seeing himself on screen, hearing his own voice talk about feeling lost and finding direction. But Mrs. Chen patted his hand and said he had done a wonderful thing by being so honest. People needed to see that veterans struggled with coming home, and they needed to see that there were paths forward. The segment had immediate impact. The animal shelter was flooded with calls from people wanting to volunteer or adopt. The veteran support group Marcus attended got several new members who said they were inspired by his story. Marcus received messages through social media from other veterans, thanking him for speaking openly about the challenges of transition. One message in particular stuck with him. It was from a young Marine who had just left active duty and was feeling lost and purposeless. He wrote that seeing Marcus's story made him realize his military skills could translate to civilian life in meaningful ways. He asked if Marcus had any advice. Marcus thought carefully before responding. He told the young Marine that the key was finding work that aligned with his values, something that gave him a reason to get up in the morning. He suggested volunteering, trying different things until something clicked. He emphasized that the transition took time and patience, just like training a nervous dog. A year after finding Luna in the forest, Marcus stood in that same clearing. He had hiked there intentionally, bringing Sargent with him. The pit bull walked confidently beside him now, no longer the terrified creature who had cowered in the shelter kennel. The forest looked different in autumn than it had that spring morning, but Marcus could still identify the exact spot where Luna had been lying with her swollen belly, afraid and alone. He thought about everything that had changed since that day. He had a dog who depended on him and who he depended on right back. He had work that mattered, helping frightened animals learn to trust again. He had friends like Sarah and David and Patricia who understood him and valued him. He had found a way to use his military training and temperament to make a real difference in his community. The emptiness that had haunted him after leaving the Marines wasn't completely gone, but it no longer defined his days. Most surprisingly, he had become something he never expected, an inspiration to others. People reached out regularly to ask about volunteering or to share their own struggles with transition. Marcus tried to respond thoughtfully to each one, paying forward the second chance that Luna had inadvertently given him. Sargent sniffed around the base of the old oak tree where Luna had given birth, probably catching traces of some animal that had passed through recently. Marcus smiled watching him. A year ago, both he and Sargent had been lost in different ways. Now they had found each other and found purpose. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. It was a photo of Luna curled up on the couch looking peaceful and content. Sarah had decided not to breed Luna again, choosing instead to let her live out her years as a beloved pet rather than a working dog. Luna deserved rest and comfort after everything she had been through. The text also mentioned that little Marcus had just earned his Canine Good Citizen certificate. Emma was so proud she had insisted on baking the dog a special cake. Standing in that forest clearing with Sargent beside him, Marcus felt gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for the instinct that had made him follow the sound of whimpering instead of continuing his walk. Gratitude for Luna's trust during those hours of labor. Gratitude for Sarah's friendship and encouragement. Gratitude for Sargent's slow transformation from terrified to trusting. And gratitude for discovering that purpose and meaning weren't things you found by searching, but things that found you when you were open to helping others. The path forward wasn't always clear, and some days were still harder than others. But Marcus had learned something crucial, that the skills developed through military service never became obsolete. They just needed to be redirected toward new missions, new ways of protecting and serving those who needed help. For Marcus, that mission now involved animals who had been abandoned or abused, and veterans who were struggling with the same transition he had faced. As Marcus and Sargent left the clearing and headed back toward the trail, Marcus made a silent promise to Luna and her puppies, wherever they all were now. He promised to keep helping, to keep volunteering, to keep sharing his story with anyone who needed to hear it. One act of compassion had saved 7 lives and changed his own. Who knew how many more could be affected if he kept putting good into the world? The afternoon sun filtered through the autumn leaves as Marcus and Sargent emerged from the forest. A family with young children was just starting down the trail. Their dog, a mixed-breed rescue, wagged his tail at Sargent. The children asked if they could pet Marcus's dog, and with a smile, Marcus said yes, watching as Sargent gently accepted their attention. This too was progress, the once fearful pit bull now comfortable around children. As they walked back to the car, Marcus realized he was happy. Not the temporary happiness that comes from a good day or a pleasant experience, but the deeper contentment that comes from living a life aligned with your values, from knowing you're making a difference, from having purpose. It had taken getting lost himself to understand how to help other lost souls find their way home. And it all started with one German shepherd in a forest, 6 puppies waiting to be born, and a Marine who chose to help. The idea took root in his mind and grew. By the time he left Sarah's house that night, Marcus had made a decision. He would talk to Patricia about officially adopting Sargent. It would be a challenge, no question about that. Sargent would need continued training, socialization, and lots of patience, but Marcus was up for the challenge. In fact, he realized he wanted the challenge. He wanted to be the person who gave Sargent a second chance, the same way helping Luna had given Marcus himself a second chance at finding purpose. As he drove home through the dark streets, Marcus realized he felt different than he had just weeks ago. The emptiness was still there sometimes, the uncertainty about his place in the world, but it was no longer overwhelming. He had direction now. He had purpose. He had made connections with people like Sarah and Patricia and David, connections based on shared values and mutual respect. He had work that mattered, even if it was volunteer work with animals instead of military service. Most importantly, he had learned something crucial about himself. The skills and qualities that had made him a good Marine, the calmness under pressure, the ability to assess situations quickly, the willingness to help those who couldn't help themselves, those traits didn't disappear just because he had taken off the uniform. They were part of who he was, and they could be channeled into new purposes, new ways of serving and making a difference. The morning Marcus officially adopted Sergeant was cold and clear, much like the morning he had found Luna in the forest. Patricia had been thrilled when he expressed interest in adopting the pit bull, though she had been honest about the challenges ahead. Sergeant would need continued training and socialization. He might always be nervous around strangers or uncomfortable in certain situations. Marcus would need to be patient and committed for the long haul. Marcus assured her he understood and was ready. The paperwork was simple, but the moment felt significant. Marcus was no longer just a volunteer passing through. He was making a commitment, taking responsibility for a living creature who had been failed by humans before, and desperately needed someone to prove that not all people were cruel or neglectful. As Marcus signed the adoption papers, Sergeant sat beside him, occasionally leaning against Marcus's leg. The dog seemed to sense something important was happening. The drive home was quiet. Sergeant sat in the back seat, looking out the window with what Marcus interpreted as cautious curiosity. When they arrived at Marcus's apartment, Sergeant hesitated at the door. This was a new place, and new places had meant bad things in the dog's past. Marcus didn't rush him. He sat on the front steps and waited, letting Sergeant take his time. After several minutes, the pit bull cautiously stepped through the doorway, nose working overtime to process all the new smells. Marcus had prepared for this day. He had bought a comfortable dog bed, quality food, toys, and all the supplies Sergeant would need. He had puppy-proofed his apartment even though Sergeant was fully grown, knowing that a nervous dog might chew or scratch when stressed. Most importantly, he had mentally prepared himself for the reality that this wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and challenges, but Marcus had never been afraid of hard work. The first few days were an adjustment for both of them. Sergeant was nervous about every sound, every movement. He followed Marcus from room to room, clearly afraid to be left alone. Marcus established a routine quickly. Morning walk, breakfast, training time, afternoon walk, dinner, evening relaxation. Dogs thrived on routine, and Sergeant especially needed the security of knowing what came next. Mrs. Chen, Marcus's elderly neighbor, was initially nervous about Marcus bringing home a pit bull. She had heard negative things about the breed on television, but Marcus invited her to meet Sergeant properly, explaining the dog's history and showing her how gentle Sergeant was with people he trusted. Within a week, Mrs. Chen was slipping Sergeant treats through the fence and telling anyone who would listen about what a sweet dog he was. Marcus continued volunteering at the shelter twice a week, now bringing Sergeant with him. Patricia thought it was good for Sergeant to be around other dogs in a controlled environment, and the other volunteers loved seeing the progress Sergeant was making. The once terrified dog who wouldn't let anyone touch him was now confidently walking on a leash, sitting on command and even playing gently with selected dogs at the shelter. 2 months after Marcus adopted Sergeant, Sarah called with news. It was time for little Marcus to go to his forever home with Emma and her family. Sarah invited Marcus to be there when the puppy left, thinking it would be meaningful for everyone involved. Marcus agreed, curious to see how the puppy had grown. When Marcus arrived at Sarah's house, he was amazed at the transformation. The 6 tiny puppies he had helped deliver in the forest were now sturdy young dogs full of energy and personality. Little Marcus, while still the smallest, had grown into a beautiful German Shepherd puppy, with alert eyes and confident stance. When Emma and her parents arrived, the puppy seemed to know immediately that something special was happening. Emma sat on the floor, and little Marcus bounded into her arms, flicking her face and wagging his tail so hard his entire back end wiggled. David and Jennifer watched with smiles, clearly confident they had made the right choice. Before they left, David pulled Marcus aside. He thanked him not just for saving the puppies, but for showing him what a veteran could do with their skills and determination after leaving the military. David admitted he had been struggling with his own transition, and Marcus's story had inspired him to look into volunteer work helping other veterans. Marcus was humbled by David's words. He had just been trying to help a dog in need. He never intended to inspire anyone or be any kind of example. But he was learning that actions ripple outward in ways we can't predict or control. His choice to follow the sound of whimpering into the woods had saved 7 lives directly, but it had also touched countless others. The families who adopted the puppies, the people who donated to the shelter after hearing the story, veterans like David who found hope in his example. As David's family drove away with little Marcus secured in a crate in their back seat, Sarah stood beside Marcus in the driveway. 4 of the puppies had now gone to their forever homes. Only 2 remained, Nova and Stella, the inseparable pair, who would be picked up the following week. Sarah admitted she would miss the chaos and noise once all the puppies were gone, but she was proud of how everything had turned out. Each puppy was going to a carefully chosen home where they would be loved and cared for properly. Luna seemed to sense her time with her puppies was ending. She was more relaxed now, less protective, allowing the remaining 2 puppies to be more independent. Sarah said Luna had been an exceptional mother, patient and nurturing even during the scary days in the forest. Marcus thought about how Luna's strength during that difficult birth had been remarkable. She had been lost alone and terrified, but she had still brought 6 healthy puppies into the world. Life settled into a comfortable pattern over the next few months. Marcus's days revolved around Sargent, his volunteer work at the shelter, and regular visits with Sarah and Luna. Sargent continued to improve, becoming more confident and trusting. He would never be a dog who loved everyone he met, but he had learned to tolerate strangers and could now go for walks in public without excessive anxiety. More importantly, the bond between Marcus and Sargent had deepened into something profound. They needed each other. Marcus also started attending a weekly support group for veterans at the local VA center. David had invited him after learning about it from a counselor. At first, Marcus was skeptical. He had never been comfortable talking about his feelings or struggles. But sitting in a room with other men and women who understood what it meant to leave the military and try to find purpose in civilian life was unexpectedly helpful. He didn't share much at first, mostly just listened. But eventually, he told them about finding Luna and how helping her had changed his perspective. One evening, nearly 6 months after the rescue, Marcus was sitting on his couch with Sargent's head in his lap, watching television when his phone rang. It was Sarah, and she sounded excited. She explained that a local television station was doing a follow-up story on Luna and the puppies, checking in to see how everyone was doing. The producer wanted to film a segment showing all 6 puppies with their adopted families, plus Luna and Marcus. It would be a feel-good piece about rescue and recovery. Sarah admitted she had already agreed to participate and hoped Marcus would too. Marcus's first instinct was to decline. He still wasn't comfortable with public attention. But Sarah reminded him that stories like this inspired people to adopt shelter animals, to volunteer, to help, instead of looking away when they encountered suffering. If sharing his story could save even one more animal, wasn't it worth being uncomfortable for an afternoon? Marcus agreed, though reluctantly. The filming took place at a local park on a sunny Saturday morning. All 6 puppies were there with their families, along with Luna and Sarah. It was chaotic and joyful, with the now nearly full-grown puppies playing together, their families sharing stories about life with their German shepherds.